This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trapp. Name a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally. Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network. Available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. How's everyone doing? Hey, thanks for joining me. Another episode here. Today we want to talk about the status quo. And you know how this topic came up in my mind. Back in the 90s, living in Dusseldorf, Germany, I was playing American football. And this guy, don't remember his name, but he ended up, they said, you just play this position. Just play it. I was like, well, I want to play that position. But he did pretty well. And guess what? That was now the status quo. That's how this topic, just so you can realize how far-fetched my mind goes. That's how I thought about this topic. And we see it in business all the time, right? Status quo is hard to change. Why are we even here? I want to show you a quick clip from a conference in 2015. If you're marveling in how much better shape I was back then, thank you. I know, but take a look at this clip and then we'll get to today's guest.
Who can tell me why this podium is up here? Why is this podium right here? Has anybody used it other than Dr. Durham? Nobody, right? They took the podium and they moved it over here for her, and now it's here. Gabe's video will have this podium in there the rest of the day, right? Because it's here, right? This is like the status quo now. So the first thing you have to do, that's a heavy podium. And I didn't even lift today. The first thing you have to do to get stories started, you have to make an effort, right? So I have to sit over there and say, why is that podium there? Who's going to use it? Do you think anybody will move it back today? Only if they really want to use it, right? You're not going to move it back just because you can be like, hey, we're missing a podium. It looks much better. With the podium right here, right? I can hold on to it. I don't fall off the stage. So you have to make an effort. It's like working out. The hardest part is to get started, right? And then once you start, the hardest part is to stop.
Flashback to 2015. Today we're in 2021, and I'm excited to talk with Allyson Strowbridge, the status change agent. Allyson, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
That was a flashback from the past, but it's true, right? I mean, the status quo, all of a sudden it's there, and this is it, and now good luck changing it.
Indeed, I think you brought up a really good point as far as like just paying attention. That's half the battle, right? We are just such creatures of habit that a lot of times we go on autopilot and we just do what we do because it's the easiest way to do it. But once you pause, take a look around and realize, gosh, maybe this isn't the best way to do this, or gosh, podium, it's totally in my way. Paying attention.
Get this podium out of my way here. So, I mean, but why is it so hard to change the status quo? Why is it? I mean, for me, it was kind of pretty natural to move that podium, right? It was kind of in my way, and I like things neat, not quite as linear as that one over there. I'll go fix it, right? I don't let it become the status quo, so to speak. But why is it so hard in general for people to even change the status quo?
Well, I've been giving this some thought, obviously, since we started chatting. And I think really, I'm just going to lay it out there. People are kind of lazy sometimes. And honestly, if it's just easiest to just keep it as it is, it's hard. Change is hard, right? And people often don't want to ask the really hard questions. They don't want to ask, why is it done this way and not another way? Because that might actually mean more work, right? I think we we resist change a lot of times, just because of those reasons, because, we're busy and we just need to get things done. And if we take a pause and pay attention and start asking questions, then that probably means that we're gonna, give ourselves more stuff to do. But, is that really such a bad thing? Maybe not. Change is constant, right? And maybe that's another part why it's difficult, is because we're constantly bombarded with, new things and changing things. And if there's something that we've just been kind of habitually doing, because we are creatures of habit after all, then it's maybe just easiest to, go with the flow and deal with the other stuff that's maybe less in our control.
Interesting comments. And I hear you talk about, well, it gives you more stuff to do. And the first thing that came to my mind when you said that, yes, I hear you, because how often have I been in meetings and I had the good idea, and before, or sometimes a horrible idea that people wanted to implement, but who ended up having to do it, right? So my reward for sharing good ideas was more work. Right. Now on the flip side, right, like, congratulations, good idea. Please stay late today. Please work the weekend. But I think maybe is that a little bit a holdover from the industrial world, right? Because I don't think I'm doing more things today, but I don't necessarily do more work, right? Because live streaming used to be a lot harder, right? So I used to actually do a lot more work for a lot less return. Content creation used to be harder. So all those things have changed. Is that the answer? If you're going to change stuff, you have to have an expectation that, I hate to say it, like, something has to go, but something has to change, right? It can't just be, oh, we're changing the status quo in addition to the crap you already have to do.
Well, I think really the big question is why does something need to change? And is it changing just for the sake of change? Or is it changing because we're trying to improve something, right? And so I think the main goal that I'm always trying to keep my eyes on is, as I aim to be more aware and pay more attention to what's going on around me, is asking why. And if something is working really well the way that it is, and it's serving a purpose, and it seems to be working, sure, sometimes it's good to reevaluate and make sure that it's still, doing what it's meant to do in the most efficient and effective way possible. But there are times, certainly, when, you recognize that, there is a way to improve this. There is a way to make it better, faster, stronger, or just, serve a purpose that maybe has shifted. I think that, there's a big thing that we need to pay attention to is shift in values, right? When we have a cultural value shift or a personal value shift, those are the times when we really have to kind of hit pause and take a look at the things that we do, whether it's in our personal lives or our business, and understand that the value shift can sometimes be the trigger that gets us thinking about, oh yeah, maybe this is an outdated thought process, and we need to, reimagine it in order to get better results.
And certainly, everybody wants to make their mark, and I'm totally stealing this from the last Real Talk episode, Real Talk, the Customer Insights Show, which you can check out at voxpopme.com. Michelle Gansley from McDonald's was just on there, and she actually talked about that. She says, look, yes, I know what I know in the insights world, but McDonald's is not a new company, right? So when I come in here, I have to learn the history. I have to learn the culture. I have to learn what's working and all those different things. I can't just come in here and say, oh, we got to change, and then maybe that I'm paraphrasing that last part a little bit, but any leader or anybody coming in and who wants to, improve processes, that doesn't mean everything has to change.
Absolutely not. And I think I think we had a glitch, but I think you're right in the sense that change and any kind of like transition can really be kind of resisted in a lot of ways by folks when they don't really understand what's in it for them, right? Why are we doing this? What's in it for me? Trying to understand, and help people find that desire within in order to, go through the process of learning new habits and reinforcing those habits in order to be, successful and sustain whatever change and transition to a future state is happening. But I think a big mistake is trying to put too much on people too fast, right? If we take baby steps, kind of one baby step or one bite at a time, it's a lot easier to manage, the kind of anxiety over, how is this going to mess up my world? If we're asking people to just make, those kind of more minute and easier to manage kinds of changes towards a future goal, right? Ripping off the Band-Aid all the way is going to cause a lot more bleeding and pain than just peeling it off a little bit at a time. And hopefully you've soaked it really well so that the sticky stuff isn't pulling your skin off with it, right? And so I think it's just, being aware that it is a natural human response to resist something that is new and scary because we don't know how it's going to change our habits or our ways of doing things or our comfort zone. That's the other thing is I think that people get very used to doing things a certain way because it's comfortable. And again, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier as far as the ease that we're looking for in our world, especially when we're living in this kind of, VUCA world where things are volatile and uncertain and they're complex and they're ambiguous. And we're just trying to reduce friction in our lives. And so you can kind of look at that, in two different ways. One being, I want to reduce friction. So I'm just going to keep doing things the way that I've been doing them because they're working, they're easy, it's in my comfort zone. Or you can be somebody like myself who's like, well, gosh, I want to reduce friction by changing things and improving them and not being complacent or satisfied with something just because it is the way that it's always been.
Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting about that comment too, is, sometimes we're used to how we're doing things, right? Like this is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. But sometimes, to me at least, when I go into like an old school, and that's a wide range of what that means, right? Could be a couple of years, could be a couple months instances. Honestly, just outdated. And, a new process would make things easier. So you have that side of the coin too, right? Where it's really just an old process. I'll give you an example. I went into a company once, a publishing company, and they were still carrying around the little bag with the sign off, that people read something. I was like, I hadn't run into this process in like 15 years. That's definitely old school and not very efficient, right? So it kind of changed on its own because at some point not everybody was in that same office. So it had to change because they couldn't mail the printed out paper or whatever. But it's interesting because some people love what they're doing or they like the process, and then other people see the friction, so they want to change it. So how do you marry those two together, those two groups of employees?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes your biggest challengers are perhaps the ones that you want to seek out in order to get inside their head, right? And understand why is it that they are resistant to doing things a different way. And sometimes that can give you, more energy and maybe more inspiration as to how to, help them come along a journey of change with you. Because the minute that you're able to potentially get them to change their way of thinking, then that's an in, that's a start, right? Getting that little bit of buy-in. And so you have to, I think, take a look at what's, maybe what's their social currency or some other thing that is motivating them. Right. And if it's something about, I'm a rule follower, I do things the way that I do them because that makes things, how should I put it? The community and so forth, it makes things more smoothly if I just follow the rules. Or if you try to unpeel, and get to the core of maybe it's their beliefs or their value system or whatnot, that helps you to understand where they're coming from. And so you're going in with a little bit more empathy and helping to show them that you're not just there to make their life more difficult or to upend, their flow or whatever. I think that's a good way to kind of start to bridge that gap.
Yeah, very interesting. Certainly, it's much easier said than done. I think we all know that. How do you know when something needs to change? What's the, how do you even get there?
Well, I think this goes back to what your video clip was and what we were kind of talking about really early on, which was just paying attention and opening your eyes to what trends are happening and sometimes, recognizing that, there's a pattern in what's, what you're observing, then that kind of, for me anyways, I feel like, kind of this instinctual, stirring in my gut that's like, okay, something isn't quite driving anymore. And so where is that? And how can I kind of continue to, peel back those layers and get to the root cause of, is it a values shift within culture itself, within the organization, within me personally, that is kind of triggering this, aha, right? And I think too, for me, I've been studying futures thinking recently, and I'm excited that I just got my certification as a foresight practitioner. And what that has helped me to do is recognize that we really should constantly be kind of scanning news and honestly, really odd things that are happening in the world, because those are some of our indicators that, if it's happening in a lot of different places and we're starting to see a pattern, that maybe that is something that is going to eventually become a future thing. And that then can be the trigger to be like, okay, so if I'm paying attention enough to notice a pattern, then there's got to be something to this, and I should be paying attention to it in order to get ahead of it and understand that maybe there's, an opportunity to be had or another reason for improving something in order to meet the needs of what we're seeing that might come out of this pattern that we've discovered. I hope all that makes sense.
So at the end of the day, somebody needs to pay attention, right? We need to pay attention to what's going on. What might we want to change? What might we not?
Absolutely. Eyes wide open.
Very, very frustrating that that's happening today. Everything looks good for the most part, but that's technology, my friends. We just got to roll with it. Now, when it comes, I call it the accidental status quo, right? And that's like, it just happens, or nobody has challenged it, or whatever, or even the guy that played a position I wanted to play. And he was now the status quo just because it happened, right? And that was it. How do we, first of all, how does that happen? And is that actually a thing, or am I just making that up? And how common is that?
It's funny because I was thinking about this and I'm like, yeah, is there really such a thing as an accidental status quo? Or is it more like somebody somewhere along the way decided that this was how they wanted to do it because it was the easiest way for them. It was their comfort zone. And so they just started projecting that this is what we're going to do because it makes sense for me. And potentially no one had the courage to speak up. Potentially nobody paid attention and they just kind of went along with it because it was also easy for them. I think really a big part of challenging the status quo is kind of coming back to that, being brave, being courageous enough to kind of like raise the red flag or be like, hey, ask those difficult questions. And that's not an easy place for people often to be, is that, zone of uncomfortable. But what that also does is it helps us to learn, right? It helps us to grow, helps us to allow others to see things from a different perspective. And if we're doing anything about becoming a more emotionally intelligent society and honoring and inviting diverse, thought in order to be more creative and inclusive and so forth, I think, leaders and individuals really just have to be more open to thinking again, right? And I'm reading Adam Grant's book, Think Again, right now. And it's just like so validating, right? Because it's just stop continuing to assume and believe everything that you've always believed just because you have, and unlearn some things in order to relearn them, and allow your brain to get some exercise. And you might actually come out on the other end saying, wow, I've really been stuck, and it kind of sheds some light on either better ways of doing things or challenges your beliefs in a way that helps you to see things from other people's perspectives. It's an awesome book, and it's really been jiving really well with my foresight training and change management, kind of all wrapped up in a nice little package.
And of course, we did have a show before with Daniel Murray about unlearning, learn everything you need to know, and then how do you unlearn certain things. And I think that's, it's easier said than done, right? Because every experience you build they build on each other, right? And if you have one experience and this is how it works and that's how things are going forward, how you react, everything, we bring our own biases to anything we do, really. So tell me about Control Shift Space. So that's your company, and of course I found you because I was looking for experts on the status quo, and I think your title was something like Status Quo Changer or Breaker, or you can correct me, whatever it is, but something like that.
You got it.
So tell me about what's your interest in the topic, and why do you focus on that, and how do people work with you?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I think mainly I started my business because I recognized that there's got to be a better way to do essentially commercial office space renovations and relocations. And at the time, I'd had kind of a experience both as a tenant, so receiving the services of interior designers and furniture providers and construction, and, obviously working with, my colleagues in order to create spaces that met the needs of my organizations. And then through that process, I decided I wanted to, actually be the one having more of an impact on multiple workspaces. So I flipped over to the dark side, I like to call it, and worked for the furniture industry and started to recognize that it was a really challenging thing for the tenants to go through this process of changing from one location to another location, and there was nobody there to really hold their hand and get them through that process. And certainly as a furniture dealership, my job at the time was to sell furniture. And at one point I was like, gosh, the clients need so much more help than just me telling them that you really need to buy this furniture, right? Like they needed education as to understand the process, to understand, why it takes so long to get drawings, and why does it take so long to select furniture, and how come the process isn't just like pushing the easy button and ordering from Amazon or something. And so I, continued to kind of work through this and ask my dealership principals, like, why can't we be more educational? Why can't we fulfill our clients' needs on a broader spectrum? And well, I was met with because this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and we sell furniture, and we don't do anything else besides sell furniture. And so I said to myself, all right, well, I'm tired of being the salesperson and schlepping stuff that I wasn't passionate about. And that's when I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to jump off this cliff. I'm going to start a business that helps from A to Z. And so that's what I do. I start with the kind of the big picture vision, and understand why a customer, is wanting to change, and how we're going to go about doing that, and give them a roadmap for getting there, and then hold their hand through the process so that they have a much easier experience, that they, when they don't know what they don't know, I'm there to help, answer those questions and actually get them thinking about questions that they probably haven't even thought to ask, and bring them through a change management process so that we can eventually get them into a workplace that truly is human-centered, that really meets the needs of their employees, I guess kind of emphasizes their brand and their culture, and really brings that workspace as more of a tool into their toolkit, if you will, versus it just being, space. It's more place, and people have a sense of belonging when we're through with our, kind of finishing touches, if you will.
And what's interesting about the whole workplace thing too is, why do I have to sit in a crappy chair just because you can't get a better? I mean, it really comes down to some of those things. That's why I love working at home, right? Because if I don't like my chair, I buy myself a new chair. If I don't like my desk, I buy myself a new desk, right? But in some companies, now companies have the whole, and I did do some work in the interior design industry. Now companies have the whole hot desking thing. Oh my God, don't get me started, right? Like hotel desks or whatever. I'm like, I like my space how I like my space. I don't know why I have to make it so difficult. Allyson, it was great to have you on the show. I appreciate you making the time. The 28 minutes, 27 minutes always go by so fast when people like you come on and share their knowledge. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's been fast but furious.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.